Hi, my name is Charlotte and I am back here on YouTube. I wasn't sure if I was going to do anything else here after my ACOTAR video. It really took off in a way that I didn't expect, didn't anticipate at all, and it is a little bit terrifying. I'm trying not to think about it too much because it freaks me out when I think about it. But I do have some ideas routing around for another project I like to get to eventually, but the timing ended up being right for me to talk about my new book, and that's what I decided to do today. I'm a very, very small-time indie fantasy writer. I wrote a trilogy of books called the Economy of Blessings trilogy, starting with Sweetness and Blessings. That came out at the end of 2021, and then I started a new project a few months after that. And this project eventually went through a few sort of rounds and iterations, but it eventually came the book that's coming out in about a month. It's called When We Walked in Memory, and it's a standalone fantasy romance. And yeah, I just thought I would talk a bit about it here, what kind of things inspired me to write it, the major elements that you can expect, stuff like that. I always start my reviews with a summary, so I figured I would just get that out of the way and read the blurb first. Frauke's illegal magic gives her the ability to manipulate people's memories, a power that has kept her trapped in service to a ruthless man since she was a child. When disaster hits unexpectedly, she seizes the sudden opportunity to escape and vows to never look back, never use her magic for ill purposes again, and learn to live an entirely new way. As she strikes out on her own, Frauke soon finds herself allied with Corentin, a fugitive royal guard who fled the palace upon realizing that his life was in danger. Frauke is determined to help Corentin remain safe and free while he does the same for her. For both of their sakes, she must unravel their king's mysterious schemes by delving into the vast, strange realm of memory. The realm is full of forgotten magic, lost wonders, and solitary ghosts, each with their own story of loss, and Frauke will contend with all of them in her search for the truth. As their fledgling friendship blossoms into something more, Frauke and Corentin will have to learn to stand together and confront the cruelty they have endured, the enemies who still pursue them, and the ancient dangers they have unearthed. When We Walked in Memory explores an ethereal magic realm's deepest mysteries, spins a delicate, vulnerable romance full of slow-building trust, and remains grounded in its dedication to depicting the extraordinary emergence of survivorhood, solidarity, and healing. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about the process and kind of how it came to be. I originally started just vaguely messing around with writing fantasy in 2019 when I was an undergrad student studying in Norway. I didn't really have any idea what I was doing. I mean, it's not really like I do now, but I was really just experimenting with all these different world building ideas. I really have a soft spot for traditional fantasy elves, and my original concept was this society of elves, kind of like the Drow, with spiders and, amazing underground cities and a mysterious god that they worshipped, but they weren't necessarily, hyper-violent and evil and things like that. And the original cast of characters that I had for this original idea was pretty large, and one of them was a girl who could use her magic to manipulate people's minds and memories, and she was being forced to use that magic in ways that she didn't want to. Eventually, the concept kind of split. All the elf stuff eventually became the Economy of Blessings trilogy, and the final product of that is this Victorian-inspired world with a very loose, kind of nebulous main plot about a woman finding her way out of an abusive marriage while piecing together how her country was conquered centuries ago. I put the other stuff aside, but I did end up pulling it out again when I started trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I came back to this story of a girl who was trapped using her magic, and I decided that was what I wanted to do next. I also did a kind of post-project analysis of the Economy of Blessings trilogy once the dust had settled. Here's what I like, here's what I think I could have done better, what I want to try next time, just to keep learning and growing as an author and trying different things. I returned to the idea of writing romance because I felt that the romantic subplot in that trilogy, it was a bit of a weak point for me. One of the things that I liked the least when I looked back and reread the book. So I decided that I wanted to try to write something with a stronger romance that was more prominently a romance as I did that. And then in the trilogy, the main character has essentially like a death in her background that she feels very responsible for, and that guilt plays an ongoing role in her life. This was a theme that I felt like I didn't explore as much as I wanted to in that trilogy. It was something that I wanted to return to and do more in depth, and essentially have it be about a much more central person in the main character's life and have it play more of a role in the story. I also wanted to use a fantasy setting again to explore social issues that are important to me, but in a less like didactic way. I think there are definitely some paragraphs in the Economy of Blessings books that are just like rants about colonialism, not the most subtle, not the most nuanced. So this time I was like, okay, let's try dialing it back a little bit while still, you know, using the fantasy plotline to explore, you know, an issue that's important to me. And then the decision to have the Economy of Blessing books be so sort of nebulous and freeform was purposeful, but I decided that I didn't want that to be the case so much here and wanted to have a more cohesive plot. And then the last thing, the trilogy is really about, you know, the main character's very, very slow, gradual process of finding her way out of an abusive relationship. So there is a lot of abuse happening on page, and it makes for quite a visceral reading experience that's very intense and difficult. So for the next book, I decided that the characters would become free very early on, and then most of the book was going to be about them kind of letting the dust settle, figure out how to start living new lives, putting the pieces together, and starting to, you know, begin their healing processes. So a little bit about how all those things look in this book. As far as the romance goes, it's what I would describe as a very quiet, like gentle, slow burn romance full of all those good things, you know, yearning, vulnerability, tenderness, and like very small gestures that are full of a lot of meaning. Two of my favorite fantasy romance writers are Juliette Marillier and Tasha Suri. Tasha Suri also writes epic fantasy now, but they just write these really, really beautiful, soft romances that are just extremely emotional, and they just make me cry, and then I have to take breaks from reading because, like, the feelings are too much. So that's kind of the vibe that I was going for with that. I love romances where both of the characters are struggling and they support each other through that, and so that was my goal with Frauke and Corentin. I am very leery when doing that of the trope where it's like, you know, falling in love magically cures someone's PTSD, or having sex somehow cures sexual trauma, so I was very careful about that. One of my beta readers, I asked about that in my beta reading feedback, and one of my beta readers said, like, it's not that those bonds or the romance fix her, it's more that the ability to form those relationships, including the romance, is tied in with her healing process. She can reach out because she gets better, and then reaching out helps her get better too. And then as far as using magic to kind of explore social justice issues, this time my focus is really on the question of, you know, making certain practices illegal based on a sense of morality and whether people think that something is too dangerous or bad for society, and then the way that that just kind of drives it underground and makes everything more dangerous, especially how that affects particularly vulnerable people. So the clear comparisons there are with sex work and reproductive rights, like abortion. These both of those feature in the work in smaller ways. In addition to the magic, that's the main exploration. I was writing the early parts of the group when Roe v. Wade was overturned, and so that really influenced just my thinking about the issue and what I wanted to explore there. As far as the trauma healing element goes, this is a really big part of the book, something that I'm really passionate about overall. There is a couple things I thought it would be helpful to mention about how I thought about it here. There's this framework of trauma healing that basically visualizes it as like a spiral upwards, like if you think of a cartoon tornado, where you sort of circle around to the same issues and experiences over and over again, but you're making upwards progress each time. So that's something that I really tried to show here, you know, in how Frauke and Corentin sort of explore the same topics, touch on the same things, but make progress together each time. One of the things that I was really interested in is moral injury and how that relates to types of trauma, things like self-blame and shame, and really the idea that we do what we can to cope, and even things like self-blame and self-harm. These are all things that we develop as ways to try to protect us, and so, you know, you can ask yourself, what is this doing to help me make sense of what happened, cope with it afterwards, and how do I, you know, figure out a new way to do that? I also really love the type of therapy called internal family systems. That's basically like a quick and dirty description. It basically says we all have all these sort of parts that serve different functions inside of us that have different roles. So like a perfectionist part, an anxious part, you know, if you're thinking about specific specific mental diagnosis, like you could say like my OCD part or my eating disorder part, you know, and the idea is that they all play different roles in trying to kind of maintain like internal homeostasis, keep everything balanced and under control. And then, you know, sometimes parts do things that aren't actually helpful for us trying to be helpful. And so the purpose of IFS is to basically, you know, get in touch with those parts and help heal them and help them find more balanced ways of all existing together. So there's some ideas sort of related to that perspective, especially when I think about like child abuse and child parts. There's a bit in this book, the book My Dark Vanessa by Elizabeth K. Russell. It's a really, really good book about grooming and the sexual abuse of a teenage girl. And there's this part where the main character is talking to her therapist, and she says, like, I swear to God, if you tell me to heal my inner child, like, don't do it, you know? And her therapist is like, yeah, I get that, but you know, it's something to think about. That really resonates for me, and resonates a lot when I think about Frauke and how she relates to herself and her sense of self-hatred and self-blame, and eventually finds her way through it. And those are things that I hope resonate for readers too. As far as plot goes, there is a plot, but it's definitely what I would call like a Charlotte-y plot, where it's still, you know, I'm never gonna be like action-packed. It's pretty slow, mostly focused on gradual character development, but definitely a lot more structured and cohesive than the Economy of Blessings trilogy. I think that's all I'm gonna say about that, so I don't spoil anything. As far as similarities to the trilogy go, I am still obsessed with ghosts and memories and like strange magical realms and exploring those, and so all of those things are here as well. They're just like remixed into a very different context and type of magic system, I guess. I feel like the way that my brain works when I come up with magic, it always just seems to get really intricate and twisty, but hopefully not confusing. That's my goal. Just some other things I thought I'd mention talking about the characters. Frauke, the protagonist, is definitely my favorite character I've written to date. I think of her as this very, very quiet, self-contained, controlled person. She is definitely like very awkward, doesn't have a lot of social skills, and really has to kind of learn how to be around people in a normal way. To me, the thing that defines her is how fierce she is. She has an incredibly strong sense of determination and loyalty and her moral principles and bravery. I always just love female characters who are strong and find their own form of empowerment that doesn't really match up with like the stereotypical idea of how a strong female character in fantasy is. I think comparing her to the trilogy's protagonist, she's a lot colder and, like I said, like very self-contained and guarded. Iruluri, the main character in the Economy of Blessings books, she is definitely more like closely based on me, and is just like, when I think about her, I just think of like she's just this raw nerve, and she's also like a lot softer in personality overall. Just as a funny note, so I commissioned the book art a while ago because the artist that I wanted had availabilities, and I wasn't sure when they'd be open again. And then I kind of forgot about it, and then I got my hair cut, and then I realized that it was very similar to Frauke's hair. I like the bangs and the blonde hair. And I was so embarrassed. I was asking my sister, like, oh my god, do you think that people are gonna think that I did that on purpose? And she was like, Charlotte, like, what are you talking about? No one cares. But we'll see. We'll see on that front. I'm very interested to see if anybody cares about that. As far as Corentin goes, my original idea for him is that I wanted to base him on Fenris from Dragon Age, which, like, red flag alert for everybody who knows me, knows my whole Dragon Age thing. I had really severe Dragon Age brain rot when I was younger, and Fenris was like the character of all time for me. So make of that what you will. I'm being very vulnerable and sharing that with you. When I was thinking about it though, and kind of developing the story and the character, I ended up with someone who had a similar background to Fenris and is also like squatting in an abandoned mansion, but he ended up developing in a really different direction, like specifically with how he feels about magic and how he doesn't really use violence like as his main problem-solving method. He really became his own person, and I got more interested in exploring a lot of the struggles that I see with my male survivors. There's an element of like the moral injury again, from the work that he did, you know, as a guard, and then also how toxic masculinity, how all those things kind of intersect in that burden of suffering after trauma. And these are the things that he kind of works through the story. And yeah, he just kind of turned into this really like steady, quiet, chill, thoughtful person. And that's, yeah, that's about Quarantine. Last thing that I wanted to talk about, there is a very important dog character in this book, a ghost dog named Ado, who is friends with Frauke and is her companion throughout the book. The relationship between the two of them is based on the relationship between my twin sister and her dog Bear, as well as books like Deerskin by Robin McKinley and the Realm of Elderlings books, specifically the books that follow Fitz by Robin Hobb. If you've read them, you know that they just have the most amazing dog friends in fantasy who are also, you know, these companions to people who are struggling with trauma. Bear is just an amazing dog, and she and my sister have the most beautiful relationship, and I wanted to just see if I could capture a bit of that. Ado is really the factor that kept Frauke alive for part of her life, and she was able to, you know, love him and protect him when she had no one else to love or protect or anything else that she could really do or control. So he is my kind of tribute to all those dogs out there, like Bear, who just make such an incredible difference in people's lives. So I am going to conclude this video with like a commemorative slideshow of bear pictures, and you know, if you don't take anything else away from this video, I hope you enjoy that. So yeah, that's about all I was going to say. If you're interested in reading the book, I would definitely say be aware of content warnings. They're on my website and they're in detail. There are advanced reader copies on NetGalley right now, and you can also just email me directly if you want one and don't want to go through NetGalley. You can pre-order the book. I have links on my website, it's on Goodreads, all of that stuff will be linked below. Yeah, I put up a poll about potential video topics a while back, and I am planning on working one of those soon. I'm just going to try to get through the book release and school and work and internship at the same time. So that's that. Thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoy the book if you read it, and yeah, now here is the bear slideshow.